Welcome to Comadres y Comics. Comadres y Comics is a podcast hosted by 3 Latina women.
We highlight the Latinx presence in the comic book industry as creators, characters, and fans.
Join us as we talk chisme, comics, fandom, and beer. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Las Pláticas. And who do we have in studio today, Kristen?
Well, hello. Don't forget, everybody, Las Pláticas is an ancillary program to Las Comadres y Comics podcast, where we talk to amazing creators and friends about all the amazing stuff that they're doing in the comic book community. And today we have with us Drew Edwards and David Bowles. Drew is a comic book writer known for his dark, atmospheric storytelling. He is the creator of Halloween Man, a chilling series exploring moral ambiguity. Just like my speaking, very ambiguous. Ambiguity, suspense, and the supernatural. Drew also co-wrote Matron with David, blending his signature intensity and narrative insight with collaborative storytelling. His work combines horror, thriller, and character-driven narratives, creating immersive worlds that challenge and captivate readers. David Bowles is a celebrated Mexican-American author, translator, and educator from South Texas. He currently serves as president of the Texas Institute of Letters and has made significant contributions to contemporary literature with works including They Call Me Güero, The Prince the Coyote, and Clockwork Curandera, one of our favorites.
Yes, I actually have it right here.
A passionate storyteller, David's writing often explores themes of culture, identity, and folklore, blending rich character-driven narratives with historical and fantastical elements. He co-founded the Latinx imprint of Scout Comics, Chispa Comics, in 2021 and has served as its co-publisher and editor-in-chief. He is also an associate professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where he teaches literature and Nahuatl, continuing his work in amplifying underrepresented voices through education and storytelling. Welcome to you both, Drew and David.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to be here. Howdy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So before we get started, I just kind of want to delve into how this interview happened. Sarah had the opportunity to meet Drew at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund event at San Diego Comic-Con this last year. And I remember her saying, "Oh my God, I met this cool guy, and I think that he's going to want to come on the show, and he's telling me all about his book, and he's Halloween Man," and she was just going on and on and on. I was like, okay, cool.
All right.
Nice to make an impression.
And so here we are. So it's really wonderful to have you both here. And we're going to be talking a lot about your project Matron that you have both worked on together. So to get started, I'd love for you to tell our listeners about the book. What is the story about, and who are the main characters?
David, do you want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start off, and then you can kind of like jump in.
All right.
Talk a little bit about how it started. So the Matron, just to give you a quick summary, is a serial killer story, an axe murderer story that's set in the Texas Hill Country, which is the center area. People think of San Antonio, Austin. The Hill Country is kind of around that area, and it is this really interesting, I think, feminist take on the serial killer storytelling trope, and it is also full of a lot of political commentary as well, because it's set during the great freeze of 2020, when famously Ted Cruz tried to take off to Cancun, and while the state was shutting down because of this unusual storm caused by climate change. And so it's a really really interesting way to talk about what it's like to live in a small Texas town that has this rich cultural heritage of Czech, German, and Mexican Americans kind of blending together in the midst of things like gentrification and climate change and the rise of fascism and so forth. And so we have this character, Zina Krennic, whose grandmother was a famous serial killer who was killed in the 70s by the police in a very kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing. And here we are 40-something years later, and as the ice storm begins to invade the state, she loses her job and she loses her home to eminent domain, and she's basically pushed to the very limits of what any middle-aged woman can be expected to put up with, and she decides that it's time to seek retribution. So she takes up the axe and mask of her grandmother and goes out to kill the rich. And I think it was really interesting here to talk about the genesis of this project, and Drew can talk about that because he told me this idea he had when we were at a convention together, the Central Texas Teen Comic-Con, which is just a great event that we like to go to every year. And we were just hanging out, and he talked to me about this idea he had that would become the Matron. So Drew, why don't you tell him about that real quick?
So the Matron didn't start out as the Matron. It actually was a pitch, or not even really a pitch. It was a series Bible. I had been hired to write a Texas Chainsaw Massacre comic book series. And at the time, outside of my work in comics, I was actually working as a butcher. And I would drive from where I was living in McKinney, Texas, into the grocery store that I was working at in Plano. So it was basically like driving from the country into the suburbs. And each time I was driving, it struck me that the suburbs were just growing more and more and more into rural areas. And I started thinking about the family from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it occurred to me that the most interesting thing that you could do with these characters would be to pull them into the 21st century and really deal with how that would affect them. So the story that I eventually came up with was called The Last Days of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it really was about the question of, well, what do these people do when a Starbucks is next to their murder house? And And so I was telling David about this because Netflix had put out their Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, which was kind of a similar idea, but done in a very shallow way, in my opinion. And I was just saying to David, like, oh, well, I was really proud of that concept, and now I'm never going to do it. And David, in his sage wisdom, said, well, you can just scrub the Texas Chainsaw Massacre part of it and do your own slasher. And in fact, I think that's what we should do. And the very next thing I know, he's over at my apartment, several weeks later, and we're sitting in my then office. It's now a nursery for my 1-year-old, but my then office. And we're working out like the details of this universe. It occurred to us that, on talking more about the universe of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that despite the fact that Leatherface is sort of the symbol of that universe and the symbol of Texas horror in a lot of ways, he's actually a rather passive character. He's sort of his family's attack dog. And it occurred to us that it might be more interesting if it was one of the heads of the family that was really drawing things. And especially the idea of an older woman was just really, really appealing, because there aren't that many female monsters. There isn't that many female slashers. So like the sort of move it into that territory. And I mean, I keep joking, but I'm also semi-serious, to sort of break the slasher glass ceiling. We really knew we had something there. And initially we were actually calling her the matriarch. And, I think I kept saying matron almost by mistake. And that's how it ended up becoming.
Yeah. Eventually I realized it sounded so much cooler, the matron.
It's easier. It rolls off the tongue quicker.
And a matron, like, there's like an image you get in your head when you hear matron, like of a woman who's like bigger and tougher and more.
Yeah,
so
I think like
maybe
a
she's
statuesque woman, usually older.
Maybe she's got to run a prison, or she runs like like
Yes.
a household or something like that. These are like imposing women, and we wanted her to be that way. She's, worked as a waitress for many years and has been, the primary caretaker of her extended family, chops wood for their fire, all this stuff. She's, you can believe, because sometimes this happens in horror movies where there's a female killer, where you're like, wow, I really going to have to suspend my disbelief that little thin 5'2" is like, I don't know. You get like a woman who's like 5'10", 5'11", weighs a good 250 pounds. It's just, you could just see it. You're like, yeah, she could pick up an axe and split a motherfucker's head open. Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
And because,
well, I think the best example of what you're talking about is in one of the recent Scream movies. David Arquette's character Dewey is dispatched by Ghostface, and we later find out that it's this rather slight teenage girl, and you're immediately incredulous that it's like, I don't know if that girl could like nearly chop David Arquette in half. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, they have to show me. They're gonna have to show me how she did it, and I want to see her struggling.
Yeah, in the Scream movies, it's really funny because whenever they show you Ghostface, you're simultaneously supposed to think this is Ghostface. He's just like always Ghostface, but then you also that it's somebody in the costume at the same time, and so they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to make him be a singular entity, but also it's a different person or people in every movie. And so we took some of that as well. We wanted the matron to be a title that's inherited. The grandmother had it. Now her granddaughter has it, and as the series progresses, we're going to see that title get passed on to other people, and we're really excited about the way it's going. But this is one of the ways you get around that is if in the Scream movies Ghostface were like some demon or deity or something like that connects with the person, that possesses them or whatever and gives them, then you'd be like, oh yeah, she's possessed by Ghostface now, so of course she can. But of course they don't do that. They don't commit to it. We, on the other hand, did like really dive into Czech folklore, Czech sacred stories of the Slavic people and so forth, and find ways that the mask of the matron is inspired by this effigy of the goddess Morana that's burned. She's the goddess of death and winter. It's burned right before the spring solstice by children and then thrown into a river to drown, and that's the way they end winter and then the spring comes. And so we drew from a lot of this, and these are legends that are kept alive by Czech Texans in the Hill Country. I have a lot of friends who I'm able to tap for like their childhood stories about some of these creepy witches and so forth, and just trying to craft a character that embodies some of those things. She's also part Mexican American, and so there's also like little touches of La Llorona and other things like that. Different types of brujas, and it's one of the cool things about having this fictional town of Ascuas. Not Ascuas as in te tengo en Ascuas, like I have you in suspense, but Ascuas as in embers, because it used to be an indigenous settlement, and then it was burned to the ground, and so it's a bad place to live. It's like Twin Peaks. It's like you don't want to be living there.
Cursed, like Gotham or whatever.
Yeah.
Sunnydale from Buffy,
There's a
Hellmouth
under it, essentially. And so we wanted it to be this rich, and we've built this backstory, or whatever, so that we're always thinking, okay, yeah, this is the things that underlie it, and the reader won't see all of that, but we understand, and it adds texture.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the connection you guys have together. Tell us a little bit about how you guys started working on this. How do you guys divide the storytelling responsibilities?
So we broke the story into, a 6-issue arc. And what we did was basically we wrote the first issue together, which was a lot of fun. We wrote it in Drew's apartment with Drew acting out the baseball bat. He's a very kinetic storyteller, and he likes to when he's blocking the action, he wants to physically think about the way it is. And so it was great. And I'm just like, just recording everything he's doing. It was really fantastic. And so after we had written that first one to kind of establish the tone and so forth, then we divvied the 4 middle issues up so that I wrote 2 and 3, which are a little more like building up, and they're focused on our other characters, the opposition to the matron, which comes from her granddaughter Roz, and Roz's girlfriend Samantha, who's Mexican American, who is ironically the granddaughter of the sheriff who killed the first matron. So it's like this twisty kind of weird thing. And these two girls are we see them in this budding relationship. They're college freshmen at a satellite campus of UTSA, of the University of Texas San Antonio. And so that, because I'm like the YA romance dude in the pair, that was me. Those are my characters that I created. I wanted to have a sapphic love story in it. Drew's like, "You write that shit, bro." Then my bro here gets 4 and 5, which are the matron just like
going on an axe murder rampage. Really,
going on an axe murder rampage.
The more slasher part.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've known each other as friends for a long time.
Yeah.
So we know a lot of each other's, writing as well, because we're familiar with each other's work, and, we talk shop enough. And I think we knew what each other's strengths were, but also the sort of stuff that, it's not that I couldn't write the romance stuff.
Of course,
but
you literally have
David is going to get more enjoyment out of doing that, and I'm going to get more enjoyment about I don't know what this says about me, but I'm going to get more enjoyment about scraping people's faces off with a bearded axe. And as David said, though, I am very much, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, and, I'm also a big EC Comics fan. And the way I channel that is that sort of kineticism. So like getting to do that stuff, is really, really juicy to me. And, so I start thinking, out like, how am I going to kill this character? How I'm going to kill this character? And you have to have that stuff in something that is horror. Like that's what people are paying.
That's what people are signing up for. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the good thing is, because Drew also has a comic at the heart of which is a romance between this really amazing woman and this like monster, basically, right? And because those kinds of things matter to him as well, we're able to then go over each other's scripts and suggest adjustments and do textual tweaks that then like uniform things out, so there's no real drastic change between it. And
the tone is consistent, because this is, it's different when something's from one writer, what we're trying to find is like that ideal marriage of tone. And, David has the way he approaches horror, and I have the way that I approach horror. And, we wanted to find that sort of happy medium. And so when the people who are coming to read it because his name is on it, they'll get what they want out of it. But when the people who are coming to read it because my name is on it, they're not getting their, they're getting something that feels like what they like from our other projects, while also feeling like something brand new.
Which is just really exciting. It's just super fantastic, and it leads to all these really fun things of like, you discover things as you write, and then they filter backwards through it. So as the more Drew wrote the matron and her confrontations with people, the more she went from being like this because we were gonna have her just basically be silent, to being kind of a quippy villain. Who in fact quotes other serial killers, and that helped us to build this backstory where she's been dealing, because she was 12 when her grandmother, who was not just a serial killer but like a cannibal serial killer who had fed her people, she's after the age of 12 has spent the past 40 years trying to keep that part of herself under control, by giving it an outlet through, true crime novels and stuff like that. So it's just great. She knows all these lines from famous serial killers, it was a brilliant kind of thing. And then when we come up with ideas like that, then we find ways to to go back and feed them into the scripts and push them forward. And it's a journey of discovery that we both love so much.
Yeah. So you guys touched upon it a little bit, but like the Matron blends elements of like folk horror, slasher aesthetics, and social commentary. So how do you guys balance suspense, scares, and emotional depth all together? Because I love that scene where she's like she's just coming back from having been like given her payout for working at a diner, and she's singing a song. And I love that because it also kind of reminds me of in a video game that I play, Dead by Daylight. There's a killer that you can play as. So it's like a killer and 4 survivors. There's one called the Huntress, and while she's like hunting you down, she's singing. And that's usually how we can tell that it's her, is because she's singing. And I just love that added aspect of it, that adds like kind of that cultural nuance as well.
Yeah. What Drew was suggesting a while ago is it's something you have to work at, something you have to think about. You have to be like, we want this thing to be gruesome, but we don't want it to be so gruesome that it's like depressing, that it's one of the reasons that we went with the artist that we went, because Monica has a style that provides a bit of distance between the gruesome nature of a woman, like literally chopping people up and then cooking them. One of the very first meals that she makes during this winter storm is pozole out of human like flesh, which is like this me like a little joke. But but you do have to think about it very carefully. But also, Drew and I have been like writing for a couple of decades now, and you begin to have like a sense of he does like things that are a little more like he said, EC Comics, a little more tongue-in-cheek, a little more like comedic in the kind of horror. And I tend to be somebody who likes things that are a little more psychological. But when you're writing for a large audience, you're like, okay, we have to have moments of levity, we have to have moments of seriousness, we have to like give people pathos and so forth. And it just, when you're aware of those things, you just work to include them. And whenever you go too far, you just admit it to each other. You're like, that's a little too sappy, bro, or that's a little too violent, man. And
that is one of the benefits of writing with a partner instead of having, going solo, is that you do have more instantaneous feedback on a lot of things. And we can ask each other, oh, is that too far? Is that too much? Is that too goofy? Is that too whatever? But at the same time,
a lot of times the answer is, I was going to say, a lot of time the answer is no, do it more. I don't want that.
Yeah, I love that. But the other thing is, about it is that, when, thinking about the different types of horror, you've mentioned suspense and thriller, things like that. We early on, even though this started, the seed of this was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre project, we really kind of wanted to go more in like a Scream, what I would call sort of fun horror. It's still scary. It's still got an edge to it. It's definitely not for kids, but at the same time, like there's certain types of horror, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that I would include in this, is that like afterwards, you want to kind of take a shower because you just feel gross after watching the movie. And I like all that kind of stuff. I'm a fan of all the different flavors of horror, but it was a matter of asking, what is right with this? What is the right tone that we're trying to strike? And I think we found it. And, David mentioned Monica, our artist. I think she definitely helped, forge the sensibilities of what the Matron ended up ultimately becoming, because, as David said, he tends to be a little bit more serious. I'm the guy that's like, okay, I'm going to make a snowman out of human flesh, like that's, and I know inherently that's kind of, and that is actually something that crops up in a later issue, but like, that's the sort of thing I put in because I do, it's gross and it's unnerving, but it's also like the 12-year-old monster kid in me is like chuckling at, like, it's like, oh, I can't believe somebody's gonna have to draw this. Like that's where I am. But then Monica comes in and she adds her own sensibility to it, and it somehow comes all together to this like very specific tone of what the Matron is, which is something that is, yes, at times ghastly, but also very, very fun in its way.
And because we're trying to say, I think some like really like moving and important things about, what it means to be, a person living in a small town when everything that matters to you is being stripped away from you, and like, how do you respond to that? It's like, there are 3 women in this conversation, and I know that you all know that women are made to to put up with so much stuff, and it's really interesting to imagine a woman pushed to the point where she's like, I've tried to play nice with you, sons of bitches, and now you're gonna find out, like, what's what. And that that kind of social commentary needs to be leavened with humor and weirdness and so forth, and because otherwise it gets too heavy-handed, and people are going to be like, "Oh, it's a woke comic," or like whatever nonsense that is. We did want to stay away from like the dude bro, like super dark, ghastly serial killer with like murky colors and stuff like that. And we've got
and I think that's fake anyway. Like that doesn't ever like the sort of edgelord, everything is depressing 100% of the time, everybody's scowling 100% of the time. That's not the way real people are. That feels fake to me. Like that inherently takes, if that's the tone of something, because like look, maybe I'm just hanging out with a bunch of very witty, erudite people, but everybody I know, no matter how bad it gets, they're still making jokes. You better believe me. Like people quit. That's almost their defense mechanism.
And I think that having Harry Saxon doing the colors, Harry Saxon is this really, really wonderful trans artist out of Greece who is our colorist, and his colors just, man, they just like I just love having scenes where like it's these cheery, bright pastel colors, and like really bad shit is getting ready to happen. It's like, I don't know, it's like it's cool. It's like a Technicolor horror film instead of like one that has like these dark blue and gold filters on it to like make it, as if the story itself didn't suffice. You have to like make everything dark and murky. I think that you can tell a story that is, compelling and terrifying, makes your skin crawl, and still have bright Technicolor. It's like, the sequel to X, Pearl. That like just bright, colors that and still just macabre as can be, or a lot of Italian giallo films, same kind of thing.
Yeah, Mario Bava used color amazingly. Hammer Studios,
yes,
also
that's another great example. Yeah.
Gorgeous, what they call Kensington gore, very neon reds, and because
I always think of Suspiria.
Yeah, Suspiria is a great example. Yeah.
Well, you both kind of touched upon how you as writers work to keep the consistency through the storytelling. And you've also talked about how Monica has been able to really keep the tone as well in her art. Can you talk about what the creative process is for you to make sure that the art actually matches your narrative vision?
Sure. I mean, basically, we have our scripts. They get edited, they get sent to her, and she sends us incredible art, and we're like, "Oh my god!" That's basically it. We're just like,
not lying.
No notes. That's fucking awesome. I don't know.
I think the most note I ever gave Monica was more blood coming out of a neck that had just been stabbed in. But like really,
well,
yeah, really, she's
How very
amazing.
John
The
Carpenter
only time
of
we ever have
you.
to give her notes is if it's like if she's misread something in the script. Like she'll have misunderstood something because we didn't like explain ourselves very well, and so we'll get sketches first, or we'll get like these kind of crude thumbnail-y kind of sketches, and I'll be like, no, what we meant was X, and then she'll be, oh, okay, and then the finished art, she's a masterful illustrator, and I think at the beginning she like second guessed herself a lot. She was unsure that she was the right artist for this. She's like, "Are you guys really want me to like be the illustrator?" And we're like, "Yeah, no, because we could see it in our heads." I mean, Drew really advocated for her, and the more I thought about it, the more I saw her art, I was like, "Yeah, I could see this, and it's like what we need." She is a great character designer, and she's really good at drawing people. And she can do action and all these things in her own comics. She does it. But her characters are like unique and full of like they're just interesting looking. They're not like your cookie cutter kind of illustrations, and so
her characters. This is going to be kind of a weird thing to say, considering that some of the stuff that I'm having her draw is decidedly not sexy. But her characters look very real, but at the same time, they have like this sort of attractiveness about them that it's very boy next door, girl next door kind of hot though. And I like that because I feel like too often in comics everybody looks like an underwear model, and that is definitely not what we wanted for this. We didn't want everybody to look like they stepped straight out of the DC universe where everybody's this perfect physical specimen. We wanted these to be believably good-looking people, but good-looking people from the Texas Hill Country, and that's
which are just like
rustic
regular
charm.
folks.
Yeah.
That's really, really awesome. In your first Kickstarter, the matron was described as authentic Texas horror. Please explain what this means and how Slavic mythology plays into the description, which you touched on. But can you just maybe address a little bit more of the authentic Texas horror?
Sure. Drew, you start.
Well, David and I both are Texans, obviously, and often the way Texas is portrayed in the media is wrong. First of all, as we've touched on, not just talking about our own backgrounds, but like talking about the background of this comic and everything, Texas is a lot more multicultural than people think. I think a lot of people know that there's a heavy Mexican influence in Texas, but they don't see all these other different, like where like there's as in the Hill Country, there's Slavic, there's German, there's Czech. Where I grew up, there was a lot of Irish immigrants, so there was a heavy Irish influence. You could go to the city, there's Vietnamese people, there's people from, especially after, Katrina, there's a lot of, Creole and Cajun people in Texas now. So like Texas has this much broader palette, and what that brings with it, how it ties back into what the matron is that brings with you a lot of different kinds of folklore. And David and I both love folklore. And, so when we started sort of more divorcing this from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, talking about the Hill Country and talking about like the sorts of folklore that we could bring into it is really how we could give it something different. Because I'm a big believer that the more specific you make something, the more relatable it is.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make this feel as authentic to the Texas Hill Country as we possibly could, while also being something that a lot of different people could get something out of it, because every area has its own mythology.
No, I mean, and that's just all that was really, really well said. And, y'all are familiar with my other work in which, I almost always am foregrounding Mexican American or Mexican or Mesoamerican pre-Spanish invasion people. And I just like Drew, I believe in the universality of the specific. Like there's no such thing as a great story that isn't rooted in something specific. And so when we were thinking about the Hill Country, the way to make this family, the Krennic family, different from the Sawyers who are in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is the Sawyers are just like generic white people, white hillbillies, and I wanted to I wanted to reflect like my Texas Czech friends and the way their grandparents still speak Czech and they're like still reading the newspaper. There are newspapers published in Texas in Czech.
Wow.
It's really interesting. There are people, there are bands like that play like polkas and stuff like that and sing songs in Czech, and a lot of these people have been like very supportive in helping to I'm kind of like looking ahead. We're given a list of questions, and I am looking ahead at the next question because it's connected to this.
Yeah, no worries. You're kind of. Let me pose the question right now so that you can continue delving it. But it was gonna be the matron features diverse characters and perspectives. So how did you ensure authenticity and representation in your collaboration? You're just saying it's your friends. Yeah.
Exactly.
So please tell us more.
I also have friends in the Czech Republic, writer friends, musician friends who are able to help me with like things that are specific to the Czech Republic. And like when that song that you were talking about that she sings when she's basically given her severance pay, and she hears a voice telling her basically like to kill them, but telling her in like old church Slavonic, which is like an ancient language that is a precursor to Czech and a bunch of other languages. The song that she sings is a song I invented. I love about horror movies from the 80s, like the little songs, like in the Nightmare on Elm Street, the kids singing a song about Freddy.
So creepy.
Yeah.
It's so free. It gives me goosebumps even thinking about it. And so I wanted a song like that in the universe of the matron for the past 40 years, or maybe even longer than that, kids have been singing in the Hill Country to warn each other about this figure, the matron. For her to sing it when she takes up that mantle, when she decides, a la mierda con estos pendejos, I'm gonna what has to be done. I'm gonna kill some people. It made it even eerier, and like she cocks her head as she's singing, and it's just freaky. I just imagine it in a movie, and I'm anticipating at some point getting with Drew's wife is
hoping the best for you,
a musician, and I'm gonna be like, God, just help us out, Jamie. Let's compose music for the song, and I'll put it out there. Because that kind of stuff it adds to it. So yeah, there are people, and of course, Drew lives in relatively close to the Hill Country now, and we know a lot of people, and so it's when you want to make sure that something is authentic, you talk to people for whom who could tell the difference, right? The mistake that people make when they're writing outside of their culture is to not check in with people from that culture. It's not, the mistake isn't writing outside of culture. The mistake is doing it badly. And you do it badly by never consulting anybody and never like running it by anybody.
And look, if later on down the line, you're reading this comic book and you think we got something wrong, write us and fact check us on it. Right. That like, I welcome that discussion, and I'm big enough to admit if I did something wrong. Hell, I'll make sure that we publish a letter for it in the back of the comic book or something. Like,
or in subsequent issues, have somebody go, man, y'all, we'll figure out a way to like write it into the actual like
something. There's too many authors out there that get defensive about the idea of doing this kind of, again, because it's that whole like knee jerk, I don't want to be woke or whatever, and it's just like, it's just called doing research, dude. Like prior to the stupid culture war that we find ourselves in, everybody still did this. Like if you were doing something that was outside of your sphere of knowledge, you boned up on it. And as David said, when you're talking about culture, the best thing to do is go to talk to the people that are in that culture. And,
the same thing holds true for writing. We have women characters, right? So what do I am clearly not a lesbian. I'm a pansexual Latino, right? And so I'm part of the queer community, but I am not a woman, nor am I lesbian. My daughter is lesbian, however. And a lot of my friends are and so forth. Neither of us is a woman, but, Jamie reads the scripts and gives us feedback, Jamie being Drew's wife, and we get other eyes on it. We are aware.
Well, we have a woman. We have a woman as an artist, and I'm sure Monica's very outspoken. I think if she thought something we were doing is stupid, she would.
Yeah, and I mean, and I have a long history of writing women characters, and I think I do. The best way, what I tell male writers who want to write women, who want to have women as like maybe not the main character, but like alternating POVs in their books, whatever. I'm like, what you have to do is write women as human beings. That's the first step right there. They're human beings. Don't quit treating them like they're weird aliens.
I do have to say though, like in terms of contrast versus my other project, like the female lead in Halloween Man is much more of like a pinup, like sexy character. So it kind of was refreshing to write the reverse of that, because like women, like everyone, contain multitudes, and you can be both of those things. But I haven't ventured outside of my own little universe that I've created very often. So this was a chance to sort of stretch other muscles with like a different type of leading lady, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I mean, you just you humble yourself. You write your characters as human first, and then as whatever specific race or ethnicity or gender they happen to be, and then you just get people to read what you're writing and to give you feedback on it, and you accept their feedback when they tell you that you've misrepresented something. It's not that hard.
It's really not. People who act like it's
too. Who would have guessed? But no, you have consistently written very well, women very well. So I applaud the both of you for expanding out of your sphere and for continuing writing such nuanced characters.
And you both have opened my minds for how I myself personally have misrepresented in my mind what Texas was like, who lives there. When I read the Slavic influence, I'm like, where is there Slavic influence?
Where are the Slavs in Texas?
Yeah. And so honestly, I'm kind of interested in going to Texas.
It's good. There's a wealth
I might
of
need a little bit
here.
more convincing, but
the good thing is most of the hill country is more or less close to the blue centers of the state. So the real scary, like rural, like far right MAGA stuff is. I mean, there's some of that in hill country, but not as much.
Are you trying to talk about where I grew up, David?
Yes. Awesome Kingdom.
I grew up in MAGA country too, and I don't even live in Texas. I grew up in Central California, so I totally can relate.
California, that's like living in living in Eastern Washington State or something. It's like scary. Yeah,
it is. It can be for sure. So horror is definitely my favorite genre of comic, of movie. I love Halloween. It is my wedding date anniversary. So I really welcomed the opportunity to read both Matron and Halloween Man. So thank you for that. But it did bring up a question for me, because both Halloween Man and the Matron deal with topics that you don't necessarily see in a horror comic or even movie. How do you both actually see horror and thriller comics as vehicles for exploring real world issues and anxieties? It's really about identity and morality and a lot of things that people, again, misconceptions and biases don't equate with horror and slasher and thriller. So how do you see those comics playing in that role?
For me, with Halloween Man, and this is also extended into the Matron, I'm somebody that has a lot of psychological divergence. I have dissociative identity disorder, which is, better known as multiple personality disorder. I have post-traumatic stress disorder for a car accident I was in that killed my twin.
Wow.
I'm a trauma survivor multiple times over. I'm an abuse survivor, and so monstrosity has always been a theme for me, is a way of me dealing with my sense of otherness, and the way that, because I've the older I've gotten, the more I aware I am of like how I react to things, and how things are working up here aren't necessarily the same as other people, and it sometimes makes me feel a bit like a space alien. And so like Halloween Man really was kind of my way of working through that and making me feel normal, and making me feel less ugly and odd and everything, because like I really wanted to just tell the story where the monster was the hero. Now, the way that is boiled over into the matron is almost the other side of that. It's, because if Solomon, Halloween Man is about being pulled back into society, pulled back into the idea of being loved and accepted, and showing that you can still find goodness in this world. The matron was almost the reverse of that. It's like, let's see how ugly and lost and twisted up you could be if you didn't necessarily find that light within. And so they're both dealing really deeply. That's very much how I approach monsters. And I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say that the matron is still a type of monster. Is that is how I see them, and I see myself in them. Like monsters, since I was a little boy, have always been my friends. And I I want to be as true to them as possible. Solomon is ultimately a positive force, whereas Xena and the matron, she's and David and I going back and forth about this a lot, but like to me, she's more he's a little bit more sympathetic towards her. I am empathetic. I don't know that I would say I am sympathetic, because I think her level of anger has pushed her past the point of being able to see her own flaws, which I do relate to, because when I was in my 20s, I was raging all the time. And so like, it's funny, she's an older character. She's actually older than I am, but when I'm writing her, I do kind of channel a lot of like that spite I had when I was in my 20s, where I just wanted to tear the entire world down around me. And, I often say with horror characters, there's two types of horror characters. There's like your classic monster, which, you're just supposed to be fearful of, but then there's sort of an antisocial wish fulfillment character. And I think Chucky is a great example of this. In comics, I think at times the Joker is a great example of this, which is why he's probably so popular, is that you do need to get those negative vibes, those negative thoughts out in a socially acceptable way. Otherwise, they're going to boil up some other way if you repress them. So you might as well get them out through the safe environment of a comic book, as opposed to, actually acting on them. I know that was a rather long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think it's still relevant, and it still ties into what does horror in real life tie into. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, Stephen King called this alligators in Beneath the Brain, and he said, it's okay to feel these things, to have these emotions, whatever, but you have to you have to open up the trapdoor and throw those alligators some meat every once in a while because you don't want them coming out. And that is really, horror is a cathartic tool that way. But yeah, I mean, the things that you said about the matron, Drew, I think are really true. There, Jen was talking about the scene where she's given her severance check and she's trying to explain to them that they can't do this to her, that she's the breadwinner in her family. Like, there's a whole extended family that depends on her. She's putting her granddaughter through college. And besides which, that restaurant, she's worked there for 30 years. It's like her life. It's, she thought of them as her family. This is, the owner is now the daughter of the woman who had hired her, who's passed away some years ago. And then when they're just like, they just throw her away like nothing because they're getting like a good deal from some gentrifiers, it just cracks her open. And she talks about, I've been trying not to listen to the wind blowing in my soul. And it's like this startling thing. And also in like the subsequent issue where she finds out the house is being taken through eminent domain, and that she wasn't made aware because her brother's been lying to her. It's kind of complicated, but she kind of goes a little catatonic at one point, and then she goes up to her room and she pulls up the floorboards, and there she's got this box where she's kept the axe and the mask and stuff like that. And she's muttering to herself, "They should have known. They should have known." But our society doesn't care. A 12-year-old girl whose parents, whose mother and grandmother were killed in front of her, is just shunted off to a relative, and the state never does anything to try to make sure that she's getting through this trauma. Whatever. We don't care. We don't care about trauma survivors. Drew knows this. The state doesn't. Our government doesn't care. And if the community, if you don't have family and community there for you, then it just curdles inside of you. And this is the story of like what happens when we don't take care of people in our community who need to be taken care of. That builds up, and then it comes back on us. And then we wish, like, oh shit, we had the chance to do something with this when she was 12. We could have, put her through therapy and done this kind of stuff, or put her in a better home. But they didn't do any of it, and now they are reaping what they sowed. 40 years later. And so I do think that's why these, like as you suggested, Kristen, these are vehicles for having these kinds of conversations. You can thrust human beings in horror comics into situations that they're unlikely to be in the real world, so that you can examine things and bring them out into the light and say, look at this, you dumbass, look at what we're doing to people. Right now I'm staying in Tucson, and they're like rounding up homeless people and pushing them, and like where do you want them to go? What are you going to give them in return, in exchange for taking them out of parks or wherever? Where are you putting them? No one cares. They just want them to go off and be invisible and die. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying that's
nothing could ever be as scary as what's going on in the world right now. It's as dark as this tale we're telling is, it's really, just, it's a catharsis for cynical feelings and cynical thoughts, because how could, you turn on the news and how can you not feel anything but despair and anger? And
just for the people who are being targeted. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That got really dark really fast, guys. I'm like, no, and just you're talking about the scene.
Put some smiley emojis up now on the screen.
You were talking about the scene, and I was just like, man, like, it just got really deep. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, we don't take care of our people, and they could just at any moment, like, just kind of, what I would say was like, kind of just let themselves go. And that could be very scary, especially for the person. And then your characters in your stories aspect of it, every year the news does a story about it on their anniversary. And that could, how do you live under that all the time? It's just really crazy.
Texans get very triggered by weather reports.
And
I'm not joking. We do. We ever since 2021, we watch those weather reports. They're really
close. And so you can imagine, like in the
gotta
universe,
tie Ted Cruz down.
Yeah, we do. But as Sarah, as maybe you're partly kind of hinting at, like in the world of if you're living in Asquas, you're being reminded every year the only survivor of the matron is now, a big deal, a best-selling author. He's a former FBI profiler, and he's got a book out. Lifetime has done a movie of the matron. So like this woman who's going to become the second matron has like all of her life just been constantly reminded. It's the anniversary, and her granddaughter at her dorm has somebody write "cannibal bitch" across the dorm door.
Yep.
Like no one leaves them alone. They don't get a chance to move beyond the trauma, and you see that happening all the time with like the Mexican American community. Everybody's always being like, "Oh, Mexican American, this is like Mexican. We've been here for centuries. What the hell are you talking about? You're acting like we just showed up yesterday." But like people don't want to let go of certain things, and they keep like replaying negative stereotypes or whatever, and getting people riled up, and then we ultimately, even though we're 20% of the population,
we're fascinated by tragedy as a culture. Like I've been revisiting a youthful preoccupation with the Jack the Ripper murders recently, and I've been thinking a lot about that particular rabbit hole, and that's over 100 years old now. And we haven't shown any sign of and partly there it's because there's a big question mark because the guy was never caught. But we are true crime is a thing because we are fascinated by death and despair, and like I don't know that you can really change that on a societal level, but I do think it's sort of important to, at least in the way we're doing it, shine a bit of a light so we can ask the question, why are we so interested in this?
Right.
Well, it's one of the few mysteries still left to us. What is it? Space, the sea, and death.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask about, you guys are indie creators, and distribution and visibility can be a challenge for you guys. How do your partnership with IPI Comics come to be? And were there any challenges in working with an internationally based publishing company?
So I'll field some of that, and then you can, because there's some things I can say about that.
I wonder if we're going to say the same thing.
Well, so I mean, I just real quick. I mean, I knew the people behind IPI because the parent company IFWG published my Garza Twins trilogy. When nobody in the U.S. would touch it because they were like, either it's got too much Spanish and the names of those Aztec gods are too difficult, or it was or I would go to a publisher of Latina literature and they'd be like, "Oh, but we don't publish fantasy." Oh, they turn up in as, "Oh, nosotros publicamos únicamente literatura," and I'm like, "Oh my God, no mamen." And so only literature. Okay,
Oh my
no
God,
fantasy
the deep
from
eye roll that I just had.
So deep roll, and you know how people can be. And so after like being turned down by 26 different agents and rejected by those publishers, IFWG put out a call for unagented manuscripts. They were trying to expand into the U.S. market, and I sent them The Smoking Mirror, and they loved it. Signed a contract for multiple books, and that book went on to win one of the Puro Bre award. They got the author honor for 2016, and then like it has now gone through like 9 printings. It was being taught in Chicago public schools and New York public schools for like the better part of a decade. So I knew those guys, and I knew they were starting a comics imprint. Drew and I had talked about different possibilities. We knew that we were gonna, at the time I was heading up Chispa, but we knew I didn't want it in Chispa because I didn't want to mix things up like that. And so we thought about different possibilities. And so I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and we were in the green room, and the guys from IPI were with me or whatever. And I had to retroactively apologize to Drew for this, but we were just chatting, whatever. And I'm like, "Hey, do you guys have a minute for me to like quickly pitch you something?" And I pitched it to them. And they loved it, and they wanted for us to be on board. Now, Drew, you can maybe address like some of these other issues about like what it's like to be in partnership with somebody who's in Australia and the complications of that.
So, overall, I don't find it, somebody that's been doing comics for a very, very long time, I wouldn't say it's that different than any, because you with the internet, the world is just a lot smaller than it used to be. Yeah. That being said, when we were running the Kickstarter, there was a lot of confusion, I think, on behalf of backers, because they kept seeing Texas, 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 Texas on everything. And then they would see Monica and David and myself, who are all from the States. But then everything, all the money and everything else was in Australian terms. And I think there was confusion on that part of like, so is this an American thing? And is this a Texas thing? And if I back it, and if I'm in the United States, am I going to even get it? Because it's in Australia. And then, of course, there were the tariffs, which were even, that's a whole other thing. But for the most part, I don't actually think that it's been that different. I mean, obviously, early on, there had to be some conversations because we have these very long text threads with everybody on them, and I would have to be like, "Hey guys, I know it's in the middle of the afternoon, but it's 3 a.m. to me. Could you just cool it for a few hours?" But like other than that, like because I've worked with Nicola Scott off and on Halloween Man. And she lives in Australia, so like that's not a new experience to me.
Okay.
Cool. Like comics these days really are very international, to a degree, and like a lot of creative teams are all. It's actually a rarity that I'm able. Like the Matron is one of the few times where I'm actually seeing my collaborators quite a bit, and even then, like I don't get to see Harry in person. Like that's the only member of the creative team that isn't in the United States. And but for the most part that part of it hasn't been a new experience to me, but there's definitely some confusion and question marks around the Kickstarter.
They're like Australian dollars and everybody's like there's a little conversion underneath it, whatever, but people get thrown at first. But I think when the second time comes around, November the 3rd is when the next Kickstarter, hits the ground running. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But hopefully by then people will be used to it. They're like, oh yeah, it's an Australian outfit. I don't know.
Yeah. Not only that, once people see that number 2, they're like, oh, the first one succeeded, so it's real, legitimate.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. So, Drew, can you please tell, you talked about it a little bit, but can you please tell our listeners about your Halloween Man comic and its universe?
Yeah, so Halloween Man, now in its about to be 25th year, is best described as the weird adventures of a zombie superhero and a sexy mad scientist girlfriend. They battle everything from giant tentacle monsters, flesh-eating zombies, vegetarian vampires, vampire dinosaurs, regular flavored vampires, Mr. Hyde, the Mummy, the Phantom of the Opry, note spelling, and Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster. You get the idea. It's also a love story. Think Fantastic Four meets Evil Dead. They travel around in this groovy flying coffin and have weird adventures. Halloween Man has the Power of the Horror movie sequel. He always comes back and he eats his villains. So, because I guess I can't ever escape flesh eating in whatever I'm writing. And we have been fortunate enough that actually just this last year we were picked up by Red 5 Comics and Simon and Schuster. And this is one of my nights off, but I've been going around doing a book tour because we have just put out an omnibus that is a collection of all the early Halloween Man stories, including some very, very beautiful artwork by Nicola Scott, who I name dropped already. And it's got a great forward by legendary Oscar nominee John Logan. And it's got that hack slash crossover, which apparently is kind of difficult to get. So if you like your comics a little bit on the weird side, this definitely will scratch that itch. Also, as David noted, it's got my own idea of what romance is in it, and you can tell me if you think it's actually romantic by reading it. But yeah, go check it out. Ask your comic book store to carry it,
or your bookstore, because
or your bookstore. Yeah. That is true.
Yeah. Simon and Schuster.
Well, I definitely have enjoyed what I've read so far, and I really like your analogy that you made of you wanted to write a story where the monster was the good guy, and you get that, and you get how when he sees what he's become, his initial response is to hide away and pull away, and his girlfriend comes in and is like, no, you think that's gonna stop me? I love you. And so that was a really great scene, and I really enjoyed that. And also the quippiness of the dialogue, and it's all really, I was very entertained. I really enjoyed what I've read so far, and
thank you.
I'm really happy to have been introduced to your book, and I would like to extend an open invitation to you both, if you're ever in the LA area doing a tour and signing, to come to my shop. I am reopening a comic book store.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Company, and we'd love to carry all of your books. So definitely, if there's a retailer level on your next Kickstarter, we definitely will be backing that. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes. David, in 2019, you co-founded the hashtag and activist movement hashtag Dignidad Literaria, which has negotiated greater Latinx representation in publishing. Dignidad Literaria has brought attention to issues of representation, equity, and fair treatment for Latino creators in publishing and comics. How has this movement influenced your work, and what concrete steps do you think the industry and creators can take to continue making meaningful change?
Yeah, no, thanks. Dignidad Literaria was like an important moment in my career where I realized, I think that a lot of people come to these kinds of crossroads where you're like, I can either play it safe or I can put it all on the line. And I can put it on the line because it matters, and because the work that I do, while obviously being about me to some extent, isn't only about me. It's about my community. It's about, greater visibility and respect for Latinos. John Picasso being the Mexican-American artist from San Antonio, who was like the first Mexican-American to host the Hugos in what was that, 2018 in San Jose at Worldcon there. He says, he told me early on when we first started like collaborating and figuring things out, he goes, we got to find a way to make Mexican-American culture be seen as badass. Right now, Mexican-Americans, at the time we were having a conversation in 2017, he goes, right now people think Mexican-Americans think gardeners, maids, hot mamacitas, or, like stuff like that. They don't take our art seriously and think of it as something that they want to like partake in, that's something that's super cool. Because you see it more with Black culture than you do with Latino culture. Latino culture is kind of, people look at it as like the thing that you do when you're just like having some beer and you want to listen to like salsa or merengue or whatever. And so, I the work that I'm doing is about opening the doors and then putting my foot in the door so that shit doesn't get shut on people that are coming behind me, and like reaching out and pulling them up. And so I do a lot of mentorship and so forth. Dignidad Literaria was really about like having these really hard conversations with the big 5 publishers. We literally, brought Macmillan to the table and had them sit there for 3 hours. We had Oprah Winfrey's people on the phone. We had all these people because we were using the book American Dirt as like a way to leverage ourselves into that conversation.
Fucking book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As a way to say, look, you guys poured millions of dollars into this book, and there's no reason that Janine Cummins can't write whatever the hell she wants to write. But why are you investing all that money and then you barely have any Latina representation in the books that you acquire? Or where's the equity in this? Where, you guys say that you're progressive, but what are you doing to really uplift voices? And so we came in to to force them to come up with a plan. And we did. I mean, we had people waiting to protest down in Zilker Park. It's like we like really put pressure on them, and it paid off. I mean, COVID came right on the heels of that, and so they were able to kind of like postpone the implementation of things, but they did, and it was, we were just one of many different groups that was bringing pressure to bear on the publishing industry. And now all those organizations are kind of like have come together under this umbrella that Representative Castro put together called the Latino Representation and Publishing Coalition. And we have regular meetings with publishers to continue to hold their feet to the fire and say, we're a watchdog. We're keeping an eye out for you. We have a congressman in our corner. We are going to hold you to the promises that you're making, that you're going to improve representation for Latinos. And that's the kind of work that has to be done. And so, yeah, I mean, writers have to be like, even right now, it feels even scarier than ever before, but you can't hide away in fear. You have got to have courage. You have got to put yourself out there. You've got to say, no, I will not allow you to just blithely get away with banning my book from schools when I'm writing for kids. Those kids deserve to have access to this book. And just because this book happens to like mention a non-binary, it's like my book, they call her Fregona, has a non-binary character in it. And it also is critical of U.S. policy and deporting undocumented people. And because of that, that's been banned in some schools. And I'm like, you shouldn't get to ban it. Kids should be able to be exposed to the notion that there ought to be a better way to handle immigration than just deporting people who have been living here for decades as contributing members of a community. And so, you have to have ovarios. You have to have like ovaries and get in there and like fight the good fight the way the matron would. Bring in your metaphorical
maybe not exactly.
Metaphorically
speaking.
Metaphorically speaking,
come back, David.
Get that axe.
Come off the ledge or put the axe down.
I just have this aversion to being sued. Is really
yeah.
We are seeing in front of our eyes the partnership where Drew said too much.
Usually the funny thing is usually the scenes that he's talking about, the murder scenes, a lot of those are mine. So it's. I mean,
there are a couple of collateral, damaged people, but for the most part, she literally is going after the people who have gentrified, the owners of these new high-end shops in this small town that's like just outside of San Antonio, between San Antonio and Austin, and that way, this is the part where Drew is kind of like, David, I don't know. I almost see her as a little bit of like a folk hero in the corrido sense. Like I can imagine making a corrido, La Matrona, da, 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 da. I don't know. I'm gonna have to write a corrido now, Drew.
The thing is
Ballad of the Matron. I think that'd be great, right?
You guys need a Spotify list to read to listen to as.
We've talked about that off and on.
Great moment.
But people do root for, you watch enough Friday the 13th movies, you eventually are rooting for Jason, right? And I think there is a place for that. Like I said, I do think the catharsis is important. But for me, if she's not a villain, she's not as fun to me.
Yeah, no, she's definitely a villain, though. She is definitely.
Yeah, she's not I don't know what the line is from, but it's not like she's like the Punisher or Dexter.
No,
it's
not that thinking about morality at all. It's about her. It's about her and her family. She's like, what she's kind of like? She's kind of like a mafioso. She's like a. She's like,
the people she is killing are definitely assholes, by and large.
But more than they're people that
do you deserve to die because you're an asshole?
Well, probably not, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's degrees of asshole. There's a guy she kills because he's an asshole at a coffee shop. That guy probably doesn't actually deserve to die. But in
Definitely.
a fictional sense, is it fun to see that guy do it?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
100%, of course.
Yeah.
Again,
Catharsis. Yeah.
exactly. So, I mean, I know it's a weird thing to bring the literaria to the matron, but like, you know, it is this. People ask me all the time, do you believe that the only way to affect social change under growing fascism is through, you know, non-violent protest? And I'm like, I can't recall a single moment in human history where a tyrant was toppled through pacifistic actions. So I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I suspect that people who get too like offended by the idea of force being used to stop authoritarian, for example, like the ripping of people out of communities, pulling people out of cars when they're dropping their kids off at work, at school and stuff like that. That force should never be used to stop that. I suspect that they're going to just have to like bite the bullet, because I think there's a point at which every other alternative is eliminated. You get backed into a corner, and I think this is the strategic mistake that tyrants make again and again and again, is they cut off every other option from people who are already down on their luck, and that leaves them. And so the matron is kind of like a symbol of that. She's and we make her, you know, a relatively bad person, because then you can either root for her or hate her and feel kind of justified either way. But in the real world, you know, people are complex mixtures of good and bad and all the things in between. And I don't know. I mean,
I have an answer for you, David.
Okay, I'm ready to hear it.
When I was younger, I was a shark. That's a skinhead against racial prejudice.
Yeah.
And I would go to punk rock shows, and I would get in fight with neo-Nazi skinheads. And there is nothing, I mean nothing, more satisfying than planting a Nazi on the ground.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Punching Nazis. That, yeah. I mean, I feel like one of the things that we could do in the future is to have, you know, a prequel comic where we show the original matron. She started in the 30s. I'd love to see her killing some, you know, American Nazis somewhere in the 40s. I think that would be really great, just to have like a one-shot comic where she
the matron versus the Third Reich.
Yeah, just because
There you go.
Guys out there, you heard it here first.
I'm sure there were like
coming to Kickstarter.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing though. That is really amazing. You really guys should make that happen. Anyways, David, Chispa Comics originally launched under Scout Comics in 2021 and has transitioned to AMP Comics as of April 2025. What does this move signify for Chispa's mission to amplify Latinx voices in the comic book industry? And how do you anticipate this change impacting the stories and creators featured under the Chispa imprint?
Cool. I'll preface this by saying that I've stepped down as editor-in-chief, although I still am like super supportive of Hector, and still will probably like do some freelance writing for them. And I've created, you know, I created with Hector like, you know, 13 different superheroes that are part of the 13, and a bunch of other characters and IP, and I want that to be successful. The move from Scout to AMP is really important because of when you're an indie comic, like an indie comic creator like IPI or Chispa or whatever, you have to have good distribution channels to get the books into the comic stores, like the one that you're reopening. You know, in the past, you needed to use Diamond and Lunar. One of those is no longer a really viable channel for comics distribution, unfortunately. But you need somebody who already has a relationship with them, and preferably has a relationship with a graphic novel distributor like Simon & Schuster or something like that. And AMP has those relationships. Because Chispa is a branch of a Hollywood production company called Mucho Mas Media. They're in LA, where you guys are at. And they created it as kind of like a sandbox for them to have Latina creators come in and either with their own IP or with IP owned by Mucho Más Media, play around and create stuff so they can simultaneously be promoting voices from the Latina community, but also creating like a pipeline of IP into film and TV. This is how the Black Demon, the film that came out and it's about to have a sequel, start filming pretty soon. It came about as originally as like a multimedia project, comic and also film that I worked with the head of Mucho Más Media, Javier Chapa, on. And so eventually, there was a film made, and then we made the comic series Black Demon Tales, and that's just the kind of thing that is intended to do. But the move to AMP, it does signify a bit of a change, and it's one of the reasons I stepped away. And no hard feelings or whatever, but there is now kind of an emphasis on taking established writers and their IP and making that a priority, rather than what I wanted, which was to invest in a lot of like unheard voices. And I
New
had like
stories.
Irene Lara Silva, who was a Texas poet laureate, do a comic. I had Lupe Mendez, who's also a former Texas poet laureate, and his wife Jasmine Mendez, who writes middle grade and adult poetry and novels, and had them do one. I had Veronique Medrano, who is a Tejano singer and also a writer, do a comic. So I was interested in like that kind of stuff and like building up a whole new like army of Latina writers. But that takes a lot of freaking money. It takes money. It doesn't generate the same kind of revenue as having a couple of really big names. So, right now we're focusing. Chispa's focusing on Alex Segura's, and Alex Segura's, New York Times bestselling writer, a really great guy. I love him to death. Great stuff. And his series, The Dusk, is now going to become like the centerpiece of that, rather than some like the 13, like I had originally intended. And so, it's going in a direction that I am supportive of, but not as interested in working on, if that makes sense to you, right? I'm not interested. I'm not as interested in spotlighting all existing creators who already have a huge following. I know that makes more money, but I'm more interested in being a champion of the little guys and creating a space for them. So, I'll continue to try to do that. But I do think Chispa is important, and I think it is like, the first step in the direction of having real Latina representation. As I said a little while ago, I mean, we make up 20% of the U.S. population, and we are definitely not making up 20% of the creative output in this country. We don't get, our work doesn't get acquired to that degree. So, things like Chispa are important. Mucho Más Media, its parent company, also does. They recently had, what's the name of the horror film that just came out?
Rosario,
and we also did a prequel comic for that as well. And so, I mean, it's great, and I'm sure that they'll continue to do a lot of tie-ins. But I wanted, for example, I created Katrina's Caravan, which is like a horror anthology series, and I wanted it to feature different Latina writers doing their stories with this wraparound, like book-ended story that Hector and I would be writing about Katrina and who she is and where she came from, whatever. And so I hope that continues, because those are really great. We had some really great. We had like V. Castro do a story for us in the first year of that. Just some really amazing stories, and there is a real need for it. But to me, the problem, and I know that y'all probably have seen this as well, is that there are a lot of Latine like comic fans, but they're not buying indie comics by Latinos. It's like you're like, hey, you don't just have to be buying Marvel and DC. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. I don't
Well, that's why we exist, to create access to all those books, because a lot of those indie creators and publishers publishers, they don't have distribution, and so they are not getting in front of the eyes of the community of the people who would want them. Because when we do shows that are Latino based, like Latino Comics Expo, Latino Comics Art Festival, they are hungry for books written by us. And so, again, like I said, that's why we started, is to try to
awesome.
put a spotlight on those creators.
Yeah. And Hector, who's now just the sole editor in chief, he also runs like Texas Latino Comic Con. And so, I mean, and you're right, you see the community come out and they are hungry. Unfortunately, the way the comics distribution world works, it's just a lot harder to break in.
Yes.
Still stuck in the 50s.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So your Kickstarter campaign for volumes 1 and 2 is listed as coming soon. When can we expect it to go live?
November 3rd.
Woohoo. Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, we get to send an email
After Día de Muertos.
After Día de Muertos. Vamos a dejar que los muertos descansen, que regresen a sus tumbas, and then right after they're back in their graves, we will, right after the dead,
Matron will start putting people into new graves.
The Matron will start,
Yeah. Wow. Contributor.
Can you share?
Huh?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Drew, that's another one shot Matron on Dia de Muertos.
Yeah, we ought to do that.
Yeah.
Can you share any?
Oh, so
Sarah,
sorry. What if you guys do a one shot about Day of the Dead and all the people that she's killed come back and visit her?
Oh shit, that's good.
Oh, I love that.
We're gonna have to give you some story credit on that one, Sarah. So.
That'd be so cool.
Are there any unique rewards that you can maybe share
You
with
can
our
be
listeners? That
killed by the matron. I think
$500.
The secret tier.
Yes.
It's the secret sauce.
Your lightness will be killed in the pages of it. Yeah. We definitely do like these really cool things like having all kinds of additional artwork that you can get access to and so forth. One of the things that we're working up towards is we probably maybe, I don't know if it's going to happen for this Kickstarter, but definitely for the last one, is that you can like actually get a replica of her mask or a replica of her axe. So we're working and we're pricing that stuff out and trying to find it, but definitely that's something that we want to have as tiers. You can get like all kinds of writing mentorship from Drew and from me. There are additional things that you can get, like annotated screenplays. We are kind of like writing in like little portions the book that the survivor of the first matron wrote, which is called Punching Death. And so for every Kickstarter, we write a couple more chapters of that. And then for the third Kickstarter, we are also going to be offering the prequel YA horror novel that Drew and I are in the midst of writing that is set the 1 year before the events of the matron. It's a young adult horror novel. Yes. Really good.
And it's set during the because you can't let any, it's set during COVID. So that in itself has been interesting. But
so the matron doesn't like play a role in it, but it's the other characters, her granddaughter and
David and I very, 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 very much want this to be an expansive universe because what's the point of a new slasher if you don't get all that stuff?
Yeah, we want like there to be this whole world around the matron and other dark figures and stuff like that. And I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but it is kind of, as we suggested before, like this kind of Twin Peaksy Sunnyvale, like just this town has got secrets and dark things going on. It's got a seedy underbelly and
in the novel, it's got a ghost alligator.
It's got a ghost alligator too. So,
so like, why are there so many serial killers in this town?
Albino ghost alligator. It's a messed up town. I tell you what. It's like
it's getting more messed up. I think the more we write about it, it was already messed up, and it's like we're just continuing.
It's coming
add
up with
on layer upon
crazier
layer.
and crazier things. So that will be one of the rewards is to have this prequel novel. I think it will be a lot of fun. And it's the first novel that Drew has ever written. We're co-writing it together, so it's a lot.
Nice.
Speaking of getting outside of my comfort zone,
Yeah.
I'm grateful for David. Yeah, I'm grateful for David every day working on that project, because it's very much a new set of muscles.
It'll be great.
Well, you both have shared so much about the works that you've done in the past, the works you're still working on, the works that you have coming in the future. Where can our listeners find and support you online, or any upcoming in-person events you might be attending?
Drew?
So you should come out and check me out at Rogues Gallery Comics if you are in the area. Rogues Gallery Comics in Round Rock, Texas, or Birdhouse Books in Austin, Texas. That's on the 18th and the 19th. Those are some in-person events that I am doing. If you want to find me online, the best way to do that is, I've just simplified. I tell everybody, go to my Instagram. That is Drew_Halloween. It'll be easy to determine that you found the right one, because there will be a lot of comic book art on there. There'll also be pictures of my gloriously mutton chopped face, as well as pictures of me and my family doing family things. But
beautiful daughter.
Yeah. But I think you should also go to either, like, if you don't live near a comic book store or a bookstore, you should go to Amazon and you should order Halloween Man. You should go to your local comic book store and grab them and go, I want a copy of Halloween Man. Your local bookstore, your Walmart, your Target. That's where I am at with that right now. And then come November 3rd, you should do it all over again, and you should support the matron, because I want all your money, because I'm raising a 1-year-old, and diapers are not cheap.
It'd be expensive raising children.
They really are.
And you guys can find me at David O. Bowles. I mean, at every social media platform I use the same handle, David O is an Oscar Bowles. My website is also davidbowles.us. And
how do you spell your last name?
Bowles, like Bowles.
Wait, is your middle name Oscar?
My middle name is Oscar, sir. Yes.
I learned something new today.
Oh my god!
Yeah, we've known each other for like more than 10 years, and he doesn't know what my middle name is.
Do you know what my middle name is?
Oh, Drew, I do not know your middle name. What is it?
It's Tyler.
No, your middle name is not Tyler. That's the most Texas thing anybody's ever been named. Drew.
It's Tyler.
Edwards.
Tyler. It's actually my real name is Bubba Bocephus Hillbilly Bob Edwards.
Y'all know. I don't know if you caught when we were talking about it. He is actually from a community called. I'm not lying. I'm not lying about the name of this place. Possum Kingdom is literally the name.
Yep.
Oh, I love it. I would say I would drop that in every conversation.
I do. And then most people are like, "That's not a real place."
That sounds real.
Googling it, and they're like, "Shit."
It sounds like a place in Over the Garden Wall.
It's a lake. It's actually quite beautiful. It is very
a kingdom
rural.
for possums.
There are a lot of possums.
I'm a fan of possums, so I think it's great.
Yeah. I was chased by an alligator not once but twice when I was a child.
There's alligators in Texas?
We have the third largest alligator population in the United States.
I did not know that. I'm going to be so real.
Listen, here's the deal. When you think of Texas, you're thinking of the part of Texas, the very small part of Texas that looks like the rest of the Southwest. The majority of Texas is humid and green and marshy, and that's all the coastal area all the way up to the piney woods, and then down to the Rio Grande Valley. All that is it's alligator country. It's scary.
I just pictured it as being flat and dry.
Yeah.
I pictured it.
There are parts of it that are flat and dry, but Texas is huge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess I always thought it was just an extension of Arizona and New Mexico.
Yeah. That's what's it.
Sorry, Texas.
It's okay.
No, it's okay.
That's why we're writing the Matron. That's where along with the killing, like actually show what
we're part of the Texas Tourism Board.
Yes, exactly.
Stay for the lush environment.
Yeah, I think. But yeah, no, I'm not at any like major events that I know of. I'm doing like things like the National Conference of Teachers of English and the Texas Book Festival. If you are in the Austin area, I will be at the Texas Book Festival on November 8th and 9th, and you can find me there. I'll be signing books and stuff like that. So that's my upcoming thing. Thank you. This has been great. This has been great. Loved it.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Thank you for
Thank you
coming.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, telling us all about your book and your Kickstarter that's coming up in November. Thank you so very much for that. And I just want to say we have been your hosts. I'm Sarah.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Jen.
And I'm David.
And I am Drew, I think.
Be sure to subscribe, click that like button, hit the bell.
Do that. Do all that.
Yes.
Do it twice if you're nice.
Do it twice. Every account, do it on main and do it on alt. Do it on all the accounts you have. The ones that you hide from your partner. Yes, we know that you got them.
Even the ones on the incognito mode, David?
Even the incognito mode.
Especially the incognito mode.
Ooh, spicy.
Thank you so much. Cuídense mucho. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Thanks.